Welcome everyone. We're going to start with our summary of the Parsha, and then we'll go through some of the details and the messages that we can take from it. So this week, another eventful portion that relates to the journeys of our forefathers. Jacob leaves Beersheba and he heads towards Charan, which is a very difficult and complicated place. He was leaving the serenity of Israel and going into the darkest realm of the world, to his uncle, Laban's home. He encounters the place. It doesn't say which place it is, but we are told in the Midrash that it is the place, Mount Moriah, where many important events happened. He lays down to sleep. This is the famous story of him encountering the angels on the ladders. They're going up and they're going down, descending on the rungs, what that image will come back to. Hashem appears to him and promises that he'll bequeath the entire land to his descendants and he'll protect him. Jacob wakes up, he erects a monument, he calls it Beit Kel, the house of Hashem, and he vowed to tithe all his belongings when Hashem, God promises a safe return, when it will be fulfilled. He arrives in Charan. In Charan, he meets a young girl whose name is Rachel, the younger daughter of Laban, his uncle, first cousin. And she arrived with her father's sheep. Jacob rolls off the very heavy rock, which takes a lot of people normally to roll off. He manages to do that. He's strong and he's got absolute intentions, and he helps give water to the flock of Rachel. Interesting contrast. The last time round, the shidduch was about to happen when Eliezer, the servant of Abraham, arrived. So the daughter gave water to drink to his flock, but here it was the other way around. Rachel tells her father about the new arrival. Laban rushes out to greet Jacob. Commentaries tell us that he knew that last time Eliezer arrived with great wealth, and this was a good, important guest to welcome in his home. But we are told that Jacob arrived with nothing. He lost all his possessions on the road. Laban asks Jacob to stipulate his wages and stay on to be his herdsman. Jacob loved Rachel and offered to serve Laban for 7 years in exchange for her hand in marriage. Well, after 7 years of service, Laban gives which daughter? The older daughter, Leah, instead of Rachel. In spite of the fact that everything was very spelled out what the deal was, he gives his older daughter Leah instead of Rachel. Jacob protests, obviously, it wasn't the deal. And Laban says, okay, no problem, I'll give you my other daughter Rachel as well, but you have to work another 7 years. The Torah tells us that he waits 1 week, he marries Rachel, and then he has to pay his labola, he has to pay off for the next 7 years of service. Leah gives birth to 4 children of the 12 tribes, Reuben, Shimon, Levi, and Judah. Rachel remains barren. Rachel's maid Bilhah, she gives her maidservant Bilhah to Jacob as a concubine, bears the sons Dan and Naphtali, as does Leah's maid Zilpah, Gad, and Asher. Okay, so we're up to 6 out of the 12 tribes. Then there's an interlude of a story where Reuven picks jasmine for his mother. Rachel asks for it. There's a deal between Rachel and Leah. She agrees to give the Dudae Bani, this jasmine that her son Reuben had picked for her. She'll give it to Rachel if Rachel would relinquish her time with Jacob that night. Leah gives birth to another 2 sons, Issachar and Zebulun. We're up to 8, and a daughter Dinah. Rachel finally gives birth to a son whose name was to be named Joseph. Jacob asked Laban for permission to return home. Okay, it's enough already. Laban realizes that his wealth was due to Yaakov, and he asks Yaakov, please stay on. You're a source of my success. You got to stay on. He agrees, and they make a deal. All the sheep that would be born streaked and spotted, which was completely unusual, would be the earnings of Jacob. Laban thought this was a great deal, because how many sheep are going to be born spotted and streaked? Laban immediately removes all the existing spotted and streaked sheep in case there'd be anything in the genes that they would give birth to the similar type of sheep. So now all he has is plain white sheep, and obviously they're not going to give birth to spotted and streaked ones. Jacob, it's almost miraculous, he makes a striped pole. He takes a pole of wood and he makes indentations in it that are striped. And in fact, when the strong and robust sheep view this stick that he puts where they're grazing, when they were mating, what happens is the sheep give birth to striped and speckled offspring. Jacob becomes a hugely wealthy man, despite Lavan's deceptive practices, not only in giving him the wrong wife, but also in stipulating wages that seem to be stacked against the herdsman Jacob. But Jacob, in fact, has this miraculous intervention, and so many of the sheep are born to be his wages. Okay, another 6 years go by. They've been there a long time, 7 plus 7 plus 6. And Hashem commands Jacob to return to Canaan. Jacob slips out. He takes his family and belongings without telling Lavan, and he leaves. Rachel steals one of Lavan's idols. Lavan caught up with them at Mount Gilad, and he complained that he was denied the opportunity to bid them farewell. How could you behave in such a way? He protested. I'm the good guy, and you simply leave without telling me. And furthermore, how could you steal my idols? Well, Jacob knew nothing about it, so he said, well, why don't you search for it? He does search, and he doesn't find the idols. Lavan and Jacob make a peace treaty. They erect a stone, that monument that's going to seal the pact. Lavan returns to Charan, and Jacob comes back to the land of Canaan, welcomed by a delegation of angels, which is quite important because we're going to constantly see how the angels are there to greet and meet and be part of Jacob's journey. So I'm going to continue now with some of the insights that we can derive from this very special storyline, and we're going to see what insights we can derive from it. So firstly, we're going to have a few slides that relate to the description of his journey from Be'er-Sheva, from the serenity of his parents' home, and entering into the land of Charan, which is described as Charan Afshel Olam, a place of great turbulence, a great of deception, a place of darkness, which is where Lavan is living. But everyone wants to be understanding why it says that Jacob went out of Beersheba and he went to Charan. Why couldn't it just say Jacob went to Charan? Why does it speak about him leaving, and it also speaks about him arriving? So the first comment that is made is that when a tzaddik leaves an environment, when a righteous person leaves an environment, something happens to Beersheba. When he left Beersheba, it wasn't going to be the same place because he impacted largely by his presence there. And therefore, it was a different city when he left it. So that's the first thing we learn from it. And what message do we take for ourselves? That we have a responsibility to have impact. That if we live in an environment, there should be something that environment benefits from us, to the point that if we would be absent, something would be lost. If we're merely mooching off the place that we're living in, that's not called living. Living means that we have some kind of message and we impact on our environment. So it is important to say that Jacob went out of Beersheba because that in itself was an event. Something happened to Beersheba. And then when he arrives in Charan, he has impact on there as well. A second thought about this is that in every journey, there's two parts. Sometimes we only engage with one of them. People sometimes journey because they're so fed up. They no longer have the resolve to engage the place they're in. So out of just being upset and frustrated, they check out. Where are you going? I actually don't know where I'm going, and I don't know if it's any better, and I don't know if the grass will be any greener. I'm not focused on where I'm going. I'm just involved in leaving. Then there are others who have this idyllic thought about where they're going to, and they don't take into consideration what they are leaving from. So the journey is described in two parts. He left Beersheba and he arrived in Charan. He had two clear objectives. The one was it was a time to leave, and there was a conscious decision that this was a time to leave to Charan. And then there was a second thing, that he wanted to arrive in Charan because that is where he was going to meet his bashert, he's going to meet his bride, his wives to be. So there is two ingredients in this journey, as there should be in all of ours. We should know why we're leaving, and we should know why we're going. Sometimes people simply emigrate because that's where it's going to be magnificent and beautiful, and they don't realize what it is that they're giving up, and can they in fact replace what they have in the destination they're going to. And sometimes, as I said, we're merely just leaving and we haven't really involved ourselves in finding out what awaits us on the other side. A second thought about this very first verse, Jacob went out from Beersheba and he went to Charan. So the commentaries say that Jacob's mission was very different from that of Abraham and Isaac. They repelled the negative elements and pushed them aside. Jacob had a different mission. It wasn't to repel the negative elements of the world, but to engage them and to transform them. And I'm going to the last point. It's for that reason that we are told that whilst his father and his grandfather made treaties with Abimelech, he specifically does not want to make a treaty with Abimelech because he's not able to engage Abimelech in a way that can transform him. He didn't want to make treaties with the world around him. He wanted to impact on the world around him. And where he couldn't, he was going to not getting involved at all. So his role was to enter into Charan and transform the situation there. And for that reason, we look at the father and the grandfather, and we see each of them had to deal with the negative because they never ever completely transformed it. And that's why each of them had a son who wasn't destined to be part of Am Yisrael. Abraham had the son Ishmael. He had Isaac, but he also had Ishmael. And Isaac has Jacob and also Esau. But for the first time, we have one of our forefathers, Jacob, who has offspring that are all and entirely holy. All his offspring were destined to be tribal leaders. They were all involved in our people Israel. And it tells us that the recipe for our dealing with this world, as taught by Jacob, is not to negate the world, not to try and impress what we can and negate what we can't, but in fact, to transform the negative elements of the world that we are coming into contact with. That is different about Jacob to his father and his grandfather. Continuing with the same verse, we're still on the very first verse of the reading of this Shabbat. Jacob went out of Beersheba and he went to Charan. So what's interesting is that specifically in Charan is where all the tribes are born. We often imagine that circumstances have to be ideal. And if the circumstances are ideal, that's when we see blessing, because the environment has to be totally conducive. Jacob's journey is a completely different journey. His journey is into the darkness, is into the night. He's constantly encountering conflict and difficulty and pain and even suffering. But he pierces through and he transforms the darkness. And specifically, he has the ability to have all of the tribes born in the place that is so filled with darkness. And this is an analogy for life in general, says the Rabbi. A soul too leaves its spiritual, idyllic, supernal source of Be'er Sheva, the well of Sheva. Sheva means seven, Sheva means satisfied, Sheva means the oath. And from a place that the soul is so comfortable in the heavens above, it journeys to Charan, literally the wrath and anguish of this world, a material world filled with deception, struggle, and hardship. And we would say, why would God take a soul and ship it down to this terrible, difficult world when the soul is so happy where it is? It would simply want to continue being in the idyllic space and place of heaven. That's what a soul would like to be. But God says, no, go down, encounter a world with all its challenges and difficulties. And the purpose of this world is obscured in this difficult place. So many problems. But the soul, just as the storyline of Jacob, specifically by encountering the challenges of a difficult world, it achieves an enduring significance only by coming down into this world, Charan. A soul is able to achieve infinitely more, to change itself and develop way beyond what it ever was in the heavens above, specifically by coming down into this world. So just as Jacob left his comfort zone and enters into a challenging world, and there gives birth to all the tribes, this is an analogy for each and every one of us. Our soul was so satisfied and happy in a beautiful world above, and it comes down into this difficult and challenging world, because this is where we are able to grow and to develop, to encounter and to become much greater than we ever could have had we remained in the heavens above. So he journeys out of Beersheba, he goes to Charan, and on the way, Vayifka b'makom, and he encounters the place. What is the place? So we are told the place, Hamakom, is the place of the Temple Mount in Jerusalem. That's where Avraham bound up Isaac when he almost sacrificed him, which was a seminal moment in the storyline of our people Israel, the readiness to sacrifice all for God. It's also where the King Solomon, would subsequently erect the Holy Temple. This is what we taught in Rashi. So he encounters the place. He is now going to stock up with all of the resources to be able to encounter this world of Charan. So we're now learning that in order to engage this word Charan, there is a prerequisite. And we'll see that this prerequisite was a place of opportunity where something happens. What happens in this place? So pausing and just talking about the fact that Vayifka b'makom means that he prayed at that place. As the Talmud teaches us, that Vayifka means not just he encountered that place, he encountered it in prayer. He encountered God in that place. And we are told that it was specifically at night. So the Midrash teaches us that each of our forefathers initiated a prayer. Abraham went out. Vayashkem Avraham baboker. He wakes up early in the morning and he goes to pray to God. So he instituted, says the Talmud, the Shachris prayer, the prayer of the morning. Isaac, it says that he went out late afternoon, lasuach basodeh, to talk to God in the field. And this was the prayer of the afternoon, which is mincha. And Jacob, it is nighttime, Vayifka b'makom, it's just before he lies down to sleep, it is dark, and he instituted the evening prayer of Ma'ariv. And taking it out of its literal sense, there is a Shachrit period of our lives, there's a Mincha period of our lives, and there's a Ma'ariv period of our lives. Well, firstly, in terms of the forefathers, Abraham was the morning period of our Jewish people. It was a dawn of a brand new era. It was an exciting beginning. This was a new day for our people Israel. Everything about Abraham was about the birth of something new. He initiated monotheism. He initiated attachment to God. It was the beginning. Isaac had a much more structured and disciplined world, and he encounters the world in the afternoon when everything is already going, and it is about continuing and ensuring that the relationship happens even as time goes by, and it's no longer the excitement of initiating and beginning, but the power to hold the line and to be resolved through life, not only as we begin. Very often it's easy to begin programs because it's exciting, we're initiating something new. But Isaac represents the afternoon, which is the part of our life in which we are busy with all other kinds of things, and we are nevertheless still focused on our attachment to Hashem. Jacob, he talks about the evening prayer, because everything about Jacob was about the night, the darkness, the difficulty, the conflict. That's going to be the theme of his life all the way through. And he says that even in the evening we have to pray. And in fact, in each of our lives, we have these different periods. There's the youth, when we are in the Shachri stage. It's morning, it's the dawn of our lives, when everything is beginning. And then there is the Mincha stage of our life, when we're in the middle of our lives and we're building families and we're building our businesses and we're involved in all of the details of life. And then there's an evening period in our life, which is when we're older, when we're on the other side, when we're in retirement age. And each of these times are a time for prayer. And in fact, the Gemara says the hardest prayer is mincha, because in the course of a day, Shachris is before you get busy with anything else, so there's not yet any distractions. Ma'ariv is at the end of the day, when you've already concluded the day and you're able to talk to Hashem. But mincha is the most complicated prayer, because that's when you're in the middle of your business dealings, right in the middle, slap bang in the middle of the day. To detach ourselves, in order to dive into Hashem is the mincha. So there's a lot of imagery relating to the prayers that they instituted, the lives that they conducted, and the message that relates to the various periods in our lives and in each day of our life. So he prays to Hashem. The first ingredient is, if you're going to go to the world of Charan, you're not going to manage on your own. You need to stock up with all of the spiritual resources and to have the energy and the power of Hashem with us. So he does that. He davens to Hashem. He prays. Then it says, after he's prayed, Vayikach me'avnei hamakom, he takes the stones of that place, Vayaseh merah shoisov, and he puts these stones around his head. What was this act? Going to sleep to put stones around his head? So Rashi gives us the interpretation. This was a defense from the wild animals. He's in the middle of the desolate place where there were wild animals frequenting, and he was concerned that if he go to sleep, he might come to harm. So he places stones around his head. What's the obvious question? If we are concerned that there are wild animals that might attack us, what good is there to just simply put stones around our head? The rest of the body remains exposed. Maybe the wild animal is going to like a different part of your body than your head. You're not only going to be endangered if you are attacked by the animal going after your head. What happens if it goes after any other part of our body? We could equally be undone and put in danger. So what is Rashi telling us? That Yaakov placed the stones specifically around his head. So Hasidus explains that it is a metaphor and it's symbolic of something much deeper. When a person has to encounter the world of Charan, this world of so many difficulties and challenges that we described above. So we have to encounter it with our hands, as the verse tells us, Yagir kapecha kisoicha, by the work of your hands you will succeed. So our bodies have to be involved in all of the challenges that we have to endure. But one of the things we have to preserve is, where is our head? Where is our headspace? Where are our thoughts? What is our focus? Our focus cannot descend into Charan. Somehow our head has to be able to retain the mission, the purpose, the goal. It has to remain connected and, in a sense, removed so that it is able to instruct and direct us through the world of Charan. So symbolically, Jacob takes the stones of that place and he puts it around his head and he says, Hashem, I've prayed to you. Please let me retain my thought process, my ideology, my goal, my purpose. Don't let that sink and descend into Charan. Let me always know, even in that place, who I am and what purpose I have from that place. So this is symbolic about which part of ourselves is involved and which part of it is not involved. So he falls asleep, his head is protected, and he sees this vision. V'hinei sulam mutzav arza, there's this ladder that stood on the earth, v'rasho magia hashamayma, and the top of the ladder reaches all the way up to the heaven. The Zohar says the step ladder is the symbol of prayer. The feet are entrenched in our world. When we begin to pray, we don't transcend our world, we start where we live. There are issues that have to be resolved. Our world is an important beginning when it comes to communicate with God. Where do I live? What are my personal problems? What are my needs and difficulties? Every day when we begin our prayers in the morning, we ask Hashem, thank you Hashem for giving me wisdom, and thank you Hashem for giving me life, and for giving me strength, and giving me clothes to wear, giving me eyes to see and ears, all of the different reasons we have to thank Hashem. We start with our own world. So we're entrenched in the earth, in the mundane, in the realm in which we live. That's where we start in prayer. But Rasho Magia Shamayma, but the head of the ladder doesn't have an absolute end. It doesn't end at 20 meters or 50 meters. Hashamayma, it ends towards the heaven. It says reach the heavens, but in fact the real translation is the top of the ladder reaches towards the heavens, constantly aspiring upwards. There is no end. There is no ultimate rise. We are able to reach the highest heights by constantly growing. Each day affords us an opportunity to reach a point higher than yesterday. And the ladder that is entrenched in the ground but reaches heavenwards represents our prayers starting where we are and reaching for a world way beyond. You might know every time you look up during the sermon when you're distracted or whenever, in our Great Park Shul, we have the stained glass windows that were beautifully created by Judith Mason. It's a great artist. So we have 12 step ladders. It's all rooted in this Shabbos' reading. The 12 step ladders represent the 12 tribes of Israel, with wings, as you'll see on the windows, representing the angels on the step ladder. But because of this Zohar, this holy passage in the Zohar, we use that theme to depict prayer, that we're able to begin a journey here below and reach way beyond. We don't have to limit ourselves in terms of what the aspirations of our journeys are all about. Also, a step ladder represents not the rocket ship. We can reach much higher if you use a rocket ship. A step ladder is not exactly able to catapult us to new heights, but that's the point of a step ladder. It's a step by step, rung by rung. What was you were reaching for a moment ago becomes the stepping rung for the next segment of our life. We're constantly growing. We are able to reach for a level and then hold that level and use that level to reach for a level beyond it. So prayer and our aspirations of growth in this world are best achieved by the step ladder format, which is to be able to go step by step, mastering and then moving on, mastering and then moving on. The last point about the step ladder is a famous Hasidic thought, and in a sense a bit of an oxymoron. It says that there are certain things in Yiddish, it says, for all of you know Yiddish, that means there's nothing as straight as a leaning ladder. Well, you would say that to be straight, you would want things to be straight up. Leaning is not exactly straight. So why does it say there's nothing as straight as a leaning ladder? Leaning implies that it's not straight. It's not completely upright. It's leaning to the side. But what it's teaching us is that sometimes in order to rise higher, it's not going to happen if we're all alone. A step ladder that is put straight up into the heavens, straight towards the sky, you need to be a circus act to be able to master that step ladder. You're not going to be able to climb a step ladder that's not leaning, because it's not, in fact, in the province of the average person, you and I, to be able to climb straight step ladders. They have to lean. And the leaning implies that we need help, that there's more than us in this world, that we need the help of others around us, and we need the help of Hashem. So we lean. We lean on each other so that we can grow to the heights that we want to grow. And all of these images are implied by the step ladder being the image of prayer. Whoops. Okay, following the verses and looking specifically at the words, it says that Jacob rose up early in the morning. So he's had his night's sleep, he's prayed, and now he's ready to go on, continue his journey towards Charan. It says, and he took the stone that he'd put under his head. But the commentaries say, 1 second. We know that he took stones, plural. He took many stones and he put it by his head. Why, when he wakes up in the morning, it sounds like there's only one stone? So the Talmud tells us that all the stones gathered themselves together in one place. And each one said, Olai, let him rest his head on me. Let him rest his head on me. So all of the stones were conflicted and fighting to be able to merit having the head of Jacob lean on them. Whereupon, miraculously, says the Talmud, the many stones became one. A very fancy story and a beautiful miracle, but what's the message? We're always looking for the message. The message is that a tzaddik arrives at a place and there are many details and there are many stones. And his impact, as we said, that we have to have on the world that we encounter, is immediately one that finds a unity that takes the conflict of each one of them saying, this is for me, this is for me, this is for me, the world of me. It's mine, it's mine, it's mine. Every fragment thinks that they are the most important. And a tzaddik's role is to transform all the fragmented elements of this world into one purpose. And when we give purpose to the world around us, we take all of the conflicting elements and we transform them into one unifying element of our lives. Everything begins to make sense. If we don't have a life of purpose, everything seems to be pulling us in different directions. But if we have a life of purpose, if we wake up in the morning and we put on our tefillin and we go through prayer and we are able to prepare ourselves for the journey, we have an impact that causes all of the disparate elements of our lives to suddenly have meaning and purpose and become part of something bigger. One bigger whole, which is the purpose of our lives. That was Jacob. He was a unifying force that was able to translate the fragments of his life into goal and purpose that was uniting and unifying and one. And one further word that I want to share with you, and that is that the Hebrew language is magnificent. Every language has important words and has messages that we can take from it, but the Hebrew language has connotations and details constantly that go beyond the obvious. And the word even, which is the Hebrew word for stone, is actually a compound of two Hebrew words, which is av, which means a parent, and ben, which means a child. And we know, as we'll soon see, when treaties were formed, and we had last week as well, they always took stones. Stones somehow were the means by which there could be a memorial, a memory of an event or place. It was a record of something important that happened. And why was it an even? Why was it a stone? Because the Stone Age remains for many years to come. Stone is able to record a message into history thousands of years away. That's the nature of the world. That what is carved into stone, the Rosetta Stone, and all the stones that we have give us an insight into civilizations thousands of years ago, because stones are able to withstand the ravages of time. That's an even. But what is implied in the Hebrew word even? It's a compound. It's a compound of the word av and ben. And what it's teaching us is that Jewish memory and Jewish history is preserved not only in stone. Stone is cold. Stone is absolute. Stone is unable to grow and to develop. The word even has a deeper connotation of av and ben, which is the journey of generations. It's when a father communicates to a son, and then the son is the father of the next son. It is av and ben, a communication between parent and child. The conscious memory of our people Israel is preserved far better and much more than it can be in stone by the generations, the journey of parents teaching children, traditions being passed from one generation to the next. And the significance of even, of the fact that there was a stone and the unifying of the stone and it becoming one stone, was all implying that there was a journey over here which was going to be a continuity of Jewish history. It was a parent, Abraham, who'd given it to Isaac, and a parent, Isaac, who'd given it to Jacob, and Jacob, who was about to now establish his progeny and the future, the sons and the daughter that he was now about to give birth to as he would enter into the world of Charan. So we have a simple storyline, but if we're ready to open our eyes and see the messages that lie beyond, there is something very beautiful unfolding in the messages that we could take from each of these little details of Jacob's journey. So we've already spoken before that Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, they instituted 3 different prayers. I want to go a little deeper. Abraham, we said, instituted the morning prayer, Shachris. Isaac, the afternoon prayer, which is Mincha. And Jacob, the night prayer, which is Ma'ariv. But now let's go a little bit deeper. The Talmud in the Tractate of Psachim says that each of the places in which their prayer took place are defined as a different realm. By Abraham, when he got up early in the morning, it says he went to the mountain. This is the mountain where he was about to sacrifice his son Isaac until God told him not to. But where did the engagement with God take place? It took place in the mountain. Interestingly, with Isaac, it says that he went out into the field. So the arena was not on the mountain, it was on the field. And Jacob, he wakes up and he says, Ein zekim beit Elokim, this is the house of God. So we actually move from mountain to field to home. What's that journey? What's the incremental growth that takes place between these different realms? Well, a mountain is a place out there, is a faraway destination, is a place that is not inhabited. It's a place that we have to journey out to discover and to find. And then we begin to bring it closer. What's a field? A field is planted in the immediacy of where people live, because the field serves the people. A field specifically is attached to the domicile, to the place where a person lives. So it implies in terms of place that that which was previously only encountered on the mountain, far away, starts coming closer to the place that we live. So Isaac brings the realm of prayer closer to where we are in our lives, the field. But it's Jacob and the journey of Jacob, the journey of darkness, that he's able to bring it home. So we move from the mountain, the place out there, far away, uninhabited, and we begin to bring it closer to where the human being lives, and even closer into our home. Now, if you are ready to go through a quick mathematical interlude, it's called gematria. So there is a very phenomenally interesting gematria and progression that happens with these words in Hebrew: mountain, field, and house. Without having the time to actually show it in its detail, the Hebrew word for mountain is a har, and har has the numerical value of 206. The word field is sadeh, and the letters of the word sadeh, sin, daled, hey, has a numerical value of 309. The word house, which is bait, bet, yud, taf, is 412. And we begin to see a progression of the number 103. 2 times 103, 3 times 103, 4 times 103. What is 103? So we don't normally do gematrias, but it's an interesting interlude. The word emunah, faith, Aleph, Mem, Vav, Nun, Hey, emunah, has a numerical value of 103. So in multiples of faith, Abraham doubled it, and he got to the mountain, which is 206. And Isaac tripled it, which gave us the word sadeh, which is 309. And Jacob caused it to be fourfold, and it's the number 412, which is the number of bait. And by Moses, when he prayed and asked God, please let me get into the land, the promised land, please. The word is Vayeitzei Charan, and he prayed to God, and Rashi says over there that the word Vayeitzei Charan has a numerical value of 515. He uttered 515 prayers, but it's interesting that Moses then completes this order of 103s, emunah times 2 times 3 times 4 and times 5, or as King David says in Psalms, va'ani tefillah, and as for me I am prayer, also the numerical value of 515, the totality of prayer. So all this I'm just showing is that there is such an order in the Torah, we can't imagine things just simply being. Let's try and move on quickly. There's the famous story that he was about to marry whom he thought was the object of his 7 years of hard work, Rachel. He says to his father-in-law, please give me es Rachel bitcha haktana, Rachel, your daughter, your youngest, haktana, your youngest one. So in fact, it became an idiom in Hebrew. If you want to say that the contract had every possible detail covered, just in case you're dealing with a crook and you have to cover every single detail in the contract, we use these words. Berachel bitcha aktana, in every single possible detail. You sealed it. There's no possibility of it going wrong. But guess what? It goes wrong. He promises to give Rachel, and instead he gives Leah. But the Midrash tells us, the Talmud tells us, that there was a very brilliant, beautiful story that happened. Leah was being led to the bridal chamber, and Rachel thought, my sister is going to be embarrassed. She made a sign because Jacob suspected Laban of his crookery and deception. So he gave Rachel a sign to identify herself so he would know that he is getting the right woman. And as Rachel sees the daughter Leah being given as a wife, she realizes the embarrassment, the failure, the sense of being undone. She cannot see her sister suffering, and she gives her sister the sign. My sister will now be disgraced, so she entrusts her with the signal, the sign that they'd given one another. So Jacob did not know it was Leah because he had been given the code. He'd been given the sign that he had deliberately given to Rachel. He didn't realize that he'd gotten the wrong woman until daybreak. So what we're told about Rachel is that there are many elements of sacrifice. And when the Jewish people were being led into exile, so many of the defense lawyers stood up for the Jewish people and said, Hashem, please save the Jewish people. Abraham said, in the merit of my readiness to sacrifice my son. Isaac, I was ready to be sacrificed. Jacob, who was ready to go through all the challenges of life and sacrifice. But it was only when Rachel stood up and said, Hashem, please save my people. Don't let them go to ruin in exile. In the merit of the fact that I gave the sign of my marriage night, I gave it to my sister Leah in order that she should not be embarrassed. In the merit of that, Hashem, save our people. And the Midrash says that God says, Mini kolech mi bechi, stop crying, Rachel. Yesh sachar, there is reward in your prayer. Please stop. It is you, Rachel, that is going to ensure the safety of our people, the survival of our people through the exile. And the commentaries say that sacrifice can come in different guises and different events. There could be an event of sacrifice, sometimes an extreme sacrifice, even as Abraham stood on the mountain ready to sacrifice his son, but it was a moment in time. What Rachel gave, the sacrifice of Rachel was her life. She gave away every day of the rest of her life when she gave the sign to her sister. The sacrifice that permeates every moment of our life is the ultimate sacrifice that Hashem is going to respond to. And therefore Rachel stands supreme, and we are told that she was buried on the way in Kever Rachel, in Beit Lechem, in Bethlehem. We go to the grave of Rachel, and when the Jewish people were led to exile, they passed by her grave because that is the road to Babylon, and it was her prayers that ensured that the Jewish people would survive the turmoil and the terrible conditions of exile. Very briefly, the verse specifically tells us that after he was tricked into marrying the wrong wife, so now Laban says, work another 7 years, but he got this one up front. Rachel was married to Jacob a week after the first marriage. From here we learn that there is a thing called Sheva Brachot, that the week after marriage, there is a whole week of celebration, just a practical application to our lives today, that the week after marriage is considered a continuation of the marriage, that although the second wife was going to be given, Rachel was going to be given to him in marriage, before he would work the 7 years for her, but they had to wait a week. That is a first indication of the concept of Sheva Brachot. Let me just choose, let's go back one last slide and we will end off the evening. So then there is this exchange of Laban who complains to Jacob, how could you take my family away from me and I didn't say goodbye? And he says the words of Laban. He says to Jacob, these daughters are my daughters. These children are my children. And the sheep are my sheep. What is the deeper message that was happening over here? So the modern day Laban is the same argument to the Jacobs of the world. The children belong to me, says Laban. You, Jacob, are fine with the way you are. You come from the old system. You belong to a different vanishing world. A man raised in the old country. You belong in Europe, whose natural habitat is the tents of Torah learning and prayer. You come from that world. But what does the world tell us today? That belonged to you and your parents and your history. But the children, what do you want of the children? They belong to another generation, to another world. They must be raised in the spirit of the times. Leave the children to me. So the Rebbe says this whole proclamation of Lavan is much, much more than the words of Lavan. It is the words of the world to us. And it says to us, so fine, you have a history. It's quaint. There's a tradition, interesting. Yeah, there's wonderful things we can learn about the past. But our children belong to a different world. Parents say it. Look at our children. We have to make sure that they can function in a world, so we turn our back onto the world that Jacob came from. And we say our children have to be able to exist and to survive in a world, which is true. But somehow we detach them from the very lifeline that gives them the strength to be able to encounter that world successfully. So don't let Lavan's words ever ring in our ears that our children belong to a different world. The children are mine, and the daughters are mine, and what they possess is mine. It's a part of a new world. We have to realize that we are encountering a world, but we are ever connected to the world that we came from. So if we look at this week's portion, it is the story of Jacob, the prayer of the night, the encountering of the darkest area of the world, going into Charan, having to live there for multiple years, being deceived again and again, being deceived with which wife he gets, being deceived with what kind of earnings he's going to earn. He's constantly involved in the darkness. But he represents the power of not only engaging the darkness, but transforming it, emerging from the greatest challenges with a wealth of accomplishment. It is Jacob more than any of our forefathers that emerges with all of his progeny being holy and being true to the mission of Israel. As it says, mitatosh lema, his entire progeny were holy. It's specifically Jacob who encounters the world and engages it and transforms it and makes the world of Charan a place of growth that is able to grow exponentially more than even his fathers. And this, as we said, was the story of our soul descending into a world. Why does God send us down from the serenity of heaven and put our souls into a body that has to go through all of the challenges of hunger and illness and challenge, difficulties? Because precisely here we can transform our souls into something that it is much greater than it ever could have been in the heavens above. And this is a challenge for all of us. The challenge of encountering, being ready and brave enough to get into the darkness, but the descent requires a prerequisite, prayer, step ladders, angels, the strength of God that comes with us, and then we fortify ourselves to enter into the world. Our heads still defended and removed, in a sense, from all of the challenges of the physical world, and with that recipe, we enter into the darkness and we emerge stronger. May we apply it in every possible way in our lives. We're going through a very dark, difficult, challenging time in the world today, with all of the elements of social distancing and lockdown and the impact on our lives and our livelihoods, on our social structures, on shul, on everything. It is imperative that we retain our headspace, our focus, that we emerge from the challenge of the difficulties that we're encountering so much stronger than we ever would have been, that we not encountered them in the first place. Thank you. Thank you so much for listening. My apologies for not sending timeous reminders about tonight. Some of our regulars are not here because they thought this Wednesday night wasn't happening. For those of you who joined, thank you so much for being here. Have a wonderful week.
Thank you. It was excellent.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Thank you, Rabbi. Thank you.
Bye-bye.